Service Manager Expert Certificate, having completed all of the ITIL version 3 courses and training most of them. She's actually been working this last year as an ITIL version 3 trainer. She was the operations director of ITSMF USA for 3 years before joining me with SoDoIT. She implemented ITIL for the largest car dealership in the United States, which is where she gained most of her service management experience over a number of years and with lots of actual hard practice experience. She's currently a business process consultant with Linium in the United States, and as I mentioned, co-founder with myself of SoDoIT Pro. So I'll now hand you over to Phyllis Drucker.
Thank you. So we're going to talk a little bit about cloud today. And the thing I want to stress the most about cloud technologies and IT service management in the cloud is that you already know how to do it. There's nothing unique, nothing new about how you manage services in the cloud. You're still managing services. The technology is different, but as IT professionals, we're going to be dealing with different technology every year. What's beautiful about the ITIL framework is that by being descriptive, not prescriptive, we have a framework we can use and adjust as the technologies change. So what we're really here to talk about today is how it's always been there all along, how businesses can leverage the cloud for success, and how do we marry the two together? How do we keep it all working well together? Where does the decision get made to go to the cloud? Why do we decide to go to the cloud? Why does cloud give us a competitive advantage, and how do we be sure that the cloud keeps us staying competitive? That, as David was talking about this morning, that we go out to the cloud and all of a sudden everything falls apart is not a good thing. So we want to make sure we have our IT service management practices doing what they need to do for the business, whatever the technology is. So everything we say here today about cloud really applies to any emerging technology. So we talk about a few things in service management. If you remember back to service operations, if you've completed that course, in service operations we talk about finding a balance between stability and agility. How do we keep things changing? How do we introduce new technologies without our existing technologies falling apart, without destabilizing our services? That's the paradigm we've lived in for the last 20 years, really, as we've been developing IT service management practices. Now, cloud brings us a new one. We want a new experience for our customers, but all the old service paradigms exist. We still have to balance innovation versus risk. We still have to deal with now shared infrastructure versus private infrastructure. And we have to deal with agility versus control. We're used to keeping things stable by having control over them. When we start going into a cloud environment, we lose control if we're in the public cloud. So I'll talk a little bit more about that in a few minutes. Additionally, as I said in the introduction, we have to know where to make that decision. We're not going to the cloud for cloud's sake. You know, it's the latest, greatest technology. But moving to the cloud is not so we could take advantage of the latest, greatest technology. We're making that decision because we have services whose business requirements demand 24/7 operations, demand access from anywhere. Then we might have services that might be deployed better in the cloud environment than in our traditional data center environment. So we need to look at the business requirements for our services and make a decision based on those requirements to leverage the latest technology. No different than anywhere else. So we will talk a little bit more about that. By having cloud technology available to us, we have the ability to make a strategic decision to provision our services in the cloud when it makes sense to do so. And that gives our business the competitive edge, because it shows that we're able, as an IT organization, we're able to use the latest technology that's available while giving the business a service that sets them in front of their competition. So that's what we want to be thinking about. What's available in cloud technology that if we applied it to our business needs could give our business the competitive edge in their industry? And that's when we want to go to the cloud. And then finally, what you're going to start to see is a new generation of computer users. How many of you have children? They're on the internet all day, right? They use the best technology that's out there. My daughter tells me things I didn't know existed about how to use the internet, how to use computer. She fixed a hard drive in her laptop. She went to Google and she typed in, how do I change a hard drive in a Dell computer? She got a video on how to change that hard drive, and she's like, Mom, look, it's right here. She stores her documents in the cloud on Dropbox. So when her hard drive did die, her documents were up in the cloud, as well as on her hard drive. What's going to happen when this generation gets out of college? They're going to be demanding everything the internet has. In our world of IT and security, we lock that down. The business customer is no longer going to accept that in a few years. So now is the time to start looking at how do we use these technologies and secure them appropriately. Instead of shutting off access to these technologies, how do we provide it but secure our data as well? So these are some of the new paradigms we deal with in this new century. So I want to do, what we're going to start with today really is a little bit about business use of the cloud. I don't know, here in Spain, is Salesforce a big application? Yeah? No? A couple people are nodding their heads. Yeah, in the US, Salesforce.com has taken over the marketing world. Most IT organizations don't even know their companies are using it. They're finding out that their company is using it when they get a call saying, you know, you've got 5,000 users, we could save you money by consolidating your licenses. And they say, but we're not using the product. Oh, yes, you are. You have 5,000 licenses. So what we're going to see when this younger generation comes out, and it's already starting, is if we don't make the technology available and someone is able to go buy it without involving IT, more and more the services being used by the business will be purchased by the business directly without involving IT. So we need to really understand what it is our business needs. And if we need Salesforce.com, IT should be bringing it to the business, saying this is a great new application. We've heard a lot about this. It's very easy, very fast to implement. Are you interested in learning more about it? Instead of waiting to find out that the business went without us, and now we have to figure out how are we supporting it. So that's one little case study about the cloud. We have a couple more for you. Oh, I went a little bit too fast. And Tom, you might as well start working your way up because you're next. Basically, we started looking at starting a business together, so doit.pro, and Tom and I looked at each other and said, how are we going to start a business? I said, you're in Spain, I'm in the US, we're 6 hours apart. We're just starting, we have no money for infrastructure. We have, long distance charges will kill us. So we have a business that is 100% in the cloud, using, basically Skype technology and using Dropbox, a couple other things. Everything we do is cloud hosted. We don't pay for anything, even mailboxes. And that's the beauty of cloud to a small business. Oh, you just want me to...
One of the things that we, to amplify a bit here, one of the things that we noticed when we were working virtually is the power of the tools that we have at our disposal. For example, one of the tools that we use for regular daily meetings is Skype. It's free, it's available, it works, except for the fact that occasionally when Phyllis is on training courses, perhaps traveling around the United States and goes and is in a hotel somewhere, and the hotel internet is so locked down that it can't cope with the video. So we say, okay, well, we just use the voice. And it is amazing how different those conversations are, how different those meetings are when it's like talking on a telephone. The difference, the dynamics of actually having the video, of being able to share screens, of being able to work as if you're in the same office, is the new wave of technology.
Yeah.
Another instance is that Phyllis went to work on a customer site, and while she was on the site, decided to have a meeting with me and wasn't able to. The organization blocked Skype. It was just not possible. No, we don't allow that kind of technology to be used in our organization. They needed to have a conference call with another organization while she was there. They had to cancel it. She was supposed to be working from home to be able to conference in with that organization. They had to cancel the meeting, and she had to fly out to the organization because they weren't able to provide any kind of conferencing video facilities. That kind of technology we need to make sure is available to our business. The business needs it. The fact that we decide that it's a security risk or it's not appropriate isn't necessarily the business case, so we need to bear that in mind. I'm going to talk to you a little bit now about my company, A1E Systems, simply because it's an example of use of the cloud. I run a small web design company in Almeria. I'm sure some of you know where that is. I had to explain where it was to Phyllis, and now she's coming to visit, so that's good. We use a lot of cloud services for the hosting, which enables us to be able to concentrate on what we do, which is the web design. We don't want to become a data center and provide servers and do hosting. We want to provide a service to our customers through the websites that we build. And in using cloud, we have to be careful because we're not a large organization. We can't dictate a data center with our own private cloud environment. We're using public cloud services. And to do that, we're tied in by the services that the cloud provider offers. So we have to make sure that the requirements that we have for our customers are met by the provider. And it's not always the case that they are. So what we do is we make sure that we have the closest match possible, and then we have resilience by having other providers that can provide backup to the services that we provide. One of the key elements is that we have to make sure that, excuse me, I'm suffering from a cough at the moment. We have to make sure that when we're providing the services to our customers, they're aware of the fact that what we're doing is providing them with the service. And because of the reduced cost of the infrastructure, we're able to be more competitive and provide a better service to our customers. Concentrating on our core competencies, and the benefit of the cloud as well is that we get what we need 99% of the time, and it's able to grow and adapt with us. So we actually get a better service using some of the cloud facilities than we would if we tried to provide dedicated services ourselves. Okay.
And just to actually expand on that a little bit, I did a little bit of a lunchtime consulting gig this past Friday. And in that company, the developers were complaining to me that they can't get the funding to have a true development or sandbox environment for each of the applications that they support. And I looked at them, I said, have you looked at some of the hosting companies like Amazon, where you can buy annual hosting on cloud infrastructure very, very cheaply, but where you get nailed, where you incur the cost is in transaction fees. If you're just doing development and a little bit of user acceptance testing, you can build those costs into the project budget and not have to stage an entire environment just to be able to play. Cloud offers tremendous flexibility to IT organizations. So, the same kind of concept. And then finally, we have the company that gave me my first introduction to cloud, which is the car dealership that I used to work for. In 1999, we actually introduced a server farm environment with a web portal that gave our dealerships access to all of the systems and applications that they needed to sell cars and manage their inventory and manage their service department. And we went from a situation where they had up to 5 desktops on a single desk, so that they could talk to the manufacturer, use their dealer management system, use their corporate applications, use their parts catalog, and use their finance applications. And we were able to take all of those different types of applications, make them available through the forerunner to the cloud. It was really Citrix and the Citrix farm environment. We were able to do that and reduce them to 1 machine per desktop. Just that one piece cut our operating costs significantly. We were also able to change the payment models for how we did business. The way things worked in our traditional IT organization is we were not allowed to charge for services. So the result was we had all these infrastructure costs and operations costs that we couldn't pass on to the dealership. When we made the third-party applications available through our web portal, the third-party hosting company was able to levy those charges. So we were able to shift a very large amount of money from corporate IT overhead to dealership expense, which got offset by the dealership revenue. So it was a very good financial transaction for our business as well. It changed the investment potential of the business tremendously. Wall Street looked upon that, the stock market looked upon that very favorably because they truly understood our operating costs while we kept a very low corporate overhead by essentially being in the cloud. And just a footnote to that, 2 years ago they moved their data center, and in that data center move they went to complete virtual technologies for the same services that we were offering back in 1999. So they are truly now operated in a private cloud environment. So we do want to take a break before we jump into the rest of the presentation for anyone that is not very familiar with cloud yet. So we have a couple of different cloud offerings that are available to us. We have software as a service, which sort of describes what I was talking about a minute ago, where you're buying the software and that's all you care about. Everything else is taken care of for you. Basically, you're buying access to software. And that's the market that Salesforce.com plays in. You've also got infrastructure or platform as a service, where you're doing some of what Tom was describing that he uses in his business, where you're buying the use of infrastructure and you own it, you host your own stuff on it, or you're buying platform, you could also be in a shared environment. So you're basically buying access to infrastructure, and depending on the particular arrangement, it could be your own infrastructure in somebody else's data center where you just operate your services on that infrastructure, but they own the equipment. Or it could be in a shared environment where they're hosting your application for you, and you don't know who else is on that server and what other companies are using that environment. So you have those two models. And then you have the last bullet there, private or public cloud. So what I talked about in our dealership group essentially is a private cloud environment. We have our own data center, or I'm not with them anymore, but while I was with them, they now have, their own private infrastructure in their own data center. They own all the cost and risk associated with that infrastructure, and they run a private cloud environment from that data center. What Tom was describing, using services that are provided by others where he could be on a shared environment with, 5 or 10 other businesses, that's what we're referring to when we talk about the public cloud. We're also talking about in public cloud when you start getting into services that, probably most of us in this room use. Your Gmail, your Google Docs, Yahoo Mail, the groups that they host, the websites they host, Dropbox, Skype, all of those really are players in the public cloud environment. And in that public cloud environment, you have 2 levels of service. You have the free service that we take advantage of for SoDoIT, where you get nothing. And we're going to talk about service level agreements later on, but basically you have no service levels, or you're doing business with them as a business where you're paying for service and you have a different service level. So that's private and public cloud. So now we're going to talk a little bit about why ITIL has addressed cloud technology since before cloud technology existed. In service strategy, when we define our services and we decide what we're going to offer as an IT organization to meet the strategic needs of the business, we also talk about a little bit at the basic level what those requirements are. What's the demand for those services? Are they going to be used throughout the day, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week? Or are they corporate services that are going to be used between 9 and 5 or 6 o'clock at night? What is the demand going to look like? When we understand that demand and where users will be accessing that service from, that's a great time to say, how are we going to provision this? Are we going to do this in our own data center on traditional servers? Or is this an application or a service that would run better in a cloud environment? So service strategy, along with service design, which we'll get to next, between them had everything we need to make that decision to move technology, to move a service into the cloud. Periodically, when we go back during continual service improvement and we look at how a service is operating, if we find that the current patterns of business activity, the current demand, again, is, road warriors, people that travel a lot, people that are accessing the application from outside the corporate environment, or 24/7 use of that service, if that's the kind of environment we're using for computing, that's a great service to migrate to the cloud. So this is where it's always been. ITIL always had that capability. We just didn't pay very close attention to the power of the provisioning model that was introduced when ITIL v3 was released. So when we move on from service strategy into service design, now we start looking at, okay, we've made a strategic decision that these services would be best provided via cloud technology. Now we're going to dive into the actual nitty-gritty details. What do I need to do every single day? How does this service need to be designed to meet the needs of our organization? And now we can put together the infrastructure requirements and validate, is cloud the best infrastructure? We could look at the design, private, public cloud, infrastructure or platform as a service. What's the best way to provision this? We could start working with our suppliers and supplier management to see if we can get the right contracts drawn up, the right technology provided to us. It's always been there. So that's where service design helps us. There's one other piece here. Right before we decide, build versus buy, we have an ability now with cloud to say, can I buy it? Do I really want to establish a cloud-based email service, or is it easier to buy a cloud-based email service? What would it cost me to buy it? What would it cost me to build and operate it? What's the best way to go? What makes the most sense to my organization? So here, still in service design, I can actually decide, once I've made the decision to go to the cloud, do I do it internally, or do I make use of the public cloud? One last word about high availability. If you're struggling with maintenance windows and the ability to keep your services up and running 100% of the time when 100% of the time is needed, start looking to the cloud. The cloud is the perfect environment to deliver the kind of availability David was talking about this morning when he didn't want to get on the plane. If your business is saying to you, no, 99.9 is not good enough, you're really looking at cloud technologies. And then a little bit more here on this slide that I'm just going to give you a second to take a look at. Basically, using that final decision, you've got the commercial products versus building versus outsourcing that you can take advantage of. There's a couple of more activities that are extremely important in service design. When I was doing training, as Tom referred to earlier, my favorite 2 units in foundation were service strategy and service design. And what I would tell my students is, if you get it right in service design, the rest of it is easy. If you don't do it well in service design, you're going to be paying for it the minute it goes live, and for the rest of your life until you adjust it. So basically, we have some very key elements in service design you want to think about when it comes to cloud. Your service level requirements. Until you know your service level requirements, you're not in a position to talk to your potential suppliers about their service level agreements, because you need to know what you're required to provide before you can look at a contract and determine whether it's good enough. Next, those critical success factors and key performance indicators. You need to know what your business says they need to succeed. And then establishing supplier standards and requirements as a design decision. What are the bare minimum? What do all your suppliers need to be able to provide for you? And then we get into the part that Tom's going to talk a little bit more about, is after you've selected your suppliers, negotiating those contracts, what to look for. Contract negotiation in cloud and hosted services is far more important than when you're just buying or leasing some systems from people. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. So just a very fast introduction about supplier drawbacks and considerations is that if you're going into the cloud environment, the relationship and the partnership with your supplier is going to be the key to your success. So you've got to make sure that you have the teeth where you need them and the ability to get support when you need it, or you need to design your service appropriately. And with that, I'm going to ask Tom to come up and talk a little bit more about what he looks for in that area.
As I was talking about before, some of the critical things that we need to look at when we're providing services is what our supplier provides to us. And in our particular case with regards to the hosting environments that we use for the web design, we have to make sure that the service levels that we have with them are sufficient for our customers' needs. Now, most of the time in the public cloud environment, and I include in that free cloud environment and some paid cloud environments that are extensions of the free cloud environments, those SLAs are more or less non-existent. For example, if you're using Gmail, you may perhaps have a failure in Gmail. What happens? What's the SLA? How quickly will they bring it back? Well, it'll come back when it comes back. What about penalties? If the service goes down, what penalty will you get? Well, it's free. How much are they going to refund you of that service that's gone down, that's not working for you? Look at the other side of that. How much has that cost you in your business with regards to lack of availability, with lost production, and more importantly, with poor perception? One of the things that is important to manage is the perception of using, above all, public cloud, whereby it could be perceived that the value is not there, it's a free service, it's rubbish, why can't we do it ourselves, we can do it better in-house. I think Phyllis has some stories with regards to corporate email, whereby it's all done in-house on in corporate servers and has a far poorer availability record than most of the public cloud email services. Excuse me. One of the things that we do in my company is when we're providing the services that we need from the public cloud, we make sure that we've got failover and resilience with multiple suppliers, so we don't rely on one particular supplier. That way, if it goes down, we can flop over to another server, we can flop over to another provider, we can provide alternative services. We don't have to rely on that supplier to restore their service within a particular timescale because we manage that. It's part of the risk that we take. We have to make sure that we manage it. In a paid cloud environment, whereby you're contracting the services and you have an SLA, you need to make sure that the SLAs and the penalties are appropriate and enforceable. And make sure that you enforce them, because if you don't, the perception will be, well, if it fails, it doesn't matter, they're not going to penalize us. We'll just fix it when we can, and when it's back, well, we'll say sorry. And that happens a lot of the time, perhaps more than we realize. It's important to make sure that we've got the resilience ourselves, that we can cope with our own restoration of service, but also that we make sure that when we have any kind of agreement with the suppliers, that they are aware of the fact that we need those agreements and those SLAs to be met. It's not just a piece of paper to fill in and check the boxes. It's important to our business. And with that, I'll pass you back to Phyllis.
So there's, and Tom spoke a little bit more about this, is when you're using those public cloud services, one of the most important things is to understand the limitation of the providers and the limitations of your contractors. As you actually look at service design, and I'll move into service transition in a minute, but as you actually look at service design, I'm reminded of what Richard Farrell was talking about earlier this morning. Incident, problem, change. When you move to the cloud environment, if you're one of those organizations that thinks you've implemented ITIL and all you've implemented is incident, problem, change, you're not going to be successful in the cloud. When you start looking at what service design offers you towards cloud technologies, availability management, capacity management, information security management, critical in the cloud environment, business continuity, all of the processes of service design need to be executed against that cloud environment for you to be successful. They've always been there. They're just more important now than ever before as you move into the cloud. Just a couple words about service transition, though, because now that I know what I'm building and where I'm going to build it, I've got to make sure I have all the ducks in a row when I'm ready to go live. So you want to also be considering all of the processes in service transition, not just change management. You need to make certain that the knowledge is passed along to all of your frontline technicians and support people so they know how they're going to support this environment, how they work with the vendors. So turnover is really critical and knowledge transfer when you start moving into cloud environments. And then finally, in service operations, this is, right, where the value gets delivered, or as I like to say, where the rubber meets the road. If you don't have a good relationship with your business to understand how well the new services are functioning for them, you don't know when you need to have conversations with your suppliers. But this is a two-way street. Service reviews with your suppliers on a regular basis, as well as service reviews with your customers on a regular basis, using the information that you're going to get from reporting during service operations. Here too, really having the service desk in the loop, getting alerts from the vendor when a service is not available or performance is poor is very critical. So you need to, again, in this environment, start looping those providers right into your idle processes, working right alongside your staff. All of that is critical for service operations. And then again, if you are doing the right things in service transition and operations, you're starting to gather the information you're going to need for the continual service improvement part of the life cycle. So you see, it's all been there all along. So this is great. I'm going to spend very quickly, because we also got our time cut a little bit because of lunch going over a little. All of it's great when the services are planned, but what about the stuff that you don't know about? So as Tom mentioned earlier, and the example I gave with the kids coming out of school, our business is going to the cloud wherever they can to get whatever services we don't provide. If it takes 3 to 5 days to get a shared folder on a network, on a file server on our network, and they could go out to Dropbox and get it in 2 minutes, they will. So what do? We shut down Dropbox. One of the things we can learn from the internet is what services our customers need and make certain we're adding those to our service portfolio rather than hamstringing them, rather than the American idioms. I don't know how well they're translating into Spanish, but before we cut off their hands and make it impossible for them to do their jobs, we need to look at how can we deliver those same services that they're looking to the internet to provide. So it's really an opportunity for us to expand our offerings using the internet as a guide. What's being offered out there? And instead of trying to lock people out of it, let's give them access to services that are just like it but better. So you want to take a look at where your policies invite people to put your information out on the cloud. One of the reasons the companies are blocking access to things like Dropbox really is the fact that I can put all my sales contacts up in my own private Dropbox, and then I can leave the company, and when I, attach to my own private email address, and then when I leave this company to go work for their competitor, I've got all my sales contacts. So if you're making it harder for them to get storage than the cloud is, you're also inviting them to look for creative ways to use the cloud. So you need to really be aware of what's out there, make sure that your own policies are not inviting people to go use these services. Additionally, you need to have some policies. So yeah, I can create a service that allows my customer to go to a link on a website, a service request link. They could provision their own storage space. They can invite other people in the company to join them there, and I can give them that. But that still doesn't prevent them from putting data out on the public cloud. So you also need policies to back it up. So it's not enough to just offer a great service. You do need to have policies with teeth in them. Policies, you know, with penalties up to and including termination if highly secured confidential data is stored in a public cloud environment. So you need to have both service as well as policies. And then finally, you know, how do we get there? You know, when you look at the slide and you see that we need to be making it as easy as the cloud providers make it, and getting IT involved in all of the decisions of the business, how do we get there? These are the challenges we're facing. So this is where you really need to have that relationship be key. If the relationship is good with the business, you don't have to worry. If the relationship is poor, they're going to get service wherever they can get it from. They've got to do their business. So what you really need to be successful in IT is not so much the latest, greatest technology, but the relationship with the business that's going to let you be sitting with the business when they define strategy. So you could be asking the questions, well, with that new direction of our company, what do you need from IT? What can we do to help you? Those are the kind of relationships you want to have with your business. Not one, you know, what I often see, in fact, in Friday's lunch session, you know, I kept hearing them, well, they expect me to be able to provision a new domain immediately. Okay, well, how quickly could they get it if they bought a domain on the internet? Because if you can't do it that quickly, they're going to go get it themselves. So you need to have the relationship that you're not fighting the business, you're part of the business. We need to be responsive and agile. So now, I don't know, do we have time for questions? Do we have questions? I may need you for questions since they may want to ask in Spanish. Do we have any questions? Well, muchas gracias. Oh, wait, we got one. We got Vernon. I may have to do David's process, though, if you have a question.
Now we run, yes.
I was just going to say that I've been working with two companies that have taken from their messaging service from an Exchange server to Gmail. And their experience hasn't been, as you suggested, an increase in availability.
Just the opposite? Yeah, see, it's very interesting because...
I think that's because people like Gmail don't take it as being a serious business service they're offering. They think
it could be.
They think it's children playing around. When they're selling it to, in one case, quite a major company, then they've got to change their whole attitude to things like availability and capacity. I don't think they're there yet.
Yeah, see, my experience in corporate email was dismal because I was used to 4-hour delays in receiving emails because of the spam blockers being so ineffective. So it's like, I guess it's a crapshoot, and that's why you need those contracts.